Now, I want to show you, this is why I say to people, if you want to red pill somebody, break their trust in government. There is nothing redeeming about government. You talk about something that's a little bit more local, you know all the people on the school board, still, that doesn't take politics out of it. You know, there's politics at work. Wherever there are people organizing and there's a hierarchy and authority in a corporate sense, in a, in a governmental, local government sense, there's always going to be humanity to deal with. And that's shit. That's why a lot of people out there are becoming more and more anarcho-capitalistic. And I understand it. I do understand it, but I think that our nature is a little bit too complex to be able to keep up with that for long. My problem here is, well, for instance, you know, like I said, if you're going to break that trust in people, to stop arguing over Democrat versus Republican, we got to take over the House and the Senate and all that shit. We got to take back the White House and all that shit. That's a dog and pony show. I vote, yeah, and I vote for very simple, shallow reasons sometimes. Usually it's just, okay, who's going to break our fall the best? Who's going to create some wind resistance as we hit the surface? Who has a chance of getting some decent judges in there? So things that people can do on local levels and state levels and all that stuff could be a little bit more successful as individuals put forward, mount legal battles against people who should be battled with. So I think about that. I think about culture wars and media wars and, you know, things that just could be fun. But it does not mean I have any more faith in the system being rectified, especially since this is really what drives the system, what we're about to get into right now. This is government. All right? So everybody's talking about these dogs. Here is from John Whitehead's Rutherford Institute. We've had him on the show a few times. He writes extensively on this kind of stuff, on human rights issues, on experimentation, everything. From the Rutherford Institute. Did you know that the U.S. government has been buying hundreds of dogs and cats from Asian meat markets as part of a gruesome experiment into foodborne illnesses? The cannibalistic experiments involve killing cats and dogs purchased from Cambodia or Colombia, Brazil, Vietnam, China, and Ethiopia, then feeding the dead remains to laboratory kittens, bred in government laboratories for the express purpose of being infected with the disease and then killed. It gets more gruesome than that. The government of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Veterans Affairs, I should say, has been removing parts of dogs' brains to see how it affects their breathing, applying electrodes to dogs' spinal cords before and after severing them to see how it impacts their cough reflexes, and implanting pacemakers in dogs' hearts and then inducing them to have heart attacks before draining their blood. All the laboratory dogs are killed during the course of these experiments. It's not just animals that are being treated like lab rats by government agencies. We the people have become the police state's guinea pigs to be caged, branded, experimented upon without our knowledge or consent, and then conveniently discarded to left to suffer suffer from the after effects. Back in 2017, FEMA inadvertently exposed nearly 10,000 firefighters, paramedics, and other responders to a deadly form of ricin during a simulated bioterrorism experiment or response session. In 2015, it was discovered that an Army lab had been mistakenly shipping deadly anthrax to labs and defense contractors for a decade. While these particular incidents have been dismissed as accidents, you don't have to dig very deep or go very back in the nation's history to uncover numerous cases in which the government deliberately conducted secret experiments on unsuspecting populace, citizens and non-citizens alike. In Alabama, for example, 600 black men with syphilis were allowed to suffer without proper medical treatment in order to study the natural progression of untreated syphilis. You know that. Or Joe Biden would tell you, that's the Tuskegee Airmen. In California, older prisoners had testicles from livestock and from recently executed convicts implanted in them to test their virility. In Connecticut, Mental patients were injected with hepatitis. In Maryland, sleeping prisoners had a pandemic flu virus sprayed up their noses. In Georgia, 24 volunteering prison inmates had gonorrhea bacteria pumped directly into their urinary tracts through the penis. In Michigan, male patients at an insane asylum were exposed to the flu after being injected with an experimental flu vaccine. In Minnesota, 11 public service employee volunteers were injected with malaria, then starved for 5 days. In New York, dying patients had cancer cells introduced into their systems. In Ohio, over 100 inmates were injected with live cancer cells. Also in New York, prisoners at a reformatory prison were also split into 2 groups to determine how a deadly stomach virus was spread. The first group was made to swallow an unfiltered stool suspension, while the second group merely breathed in germs sprayed into the air. And in Staten Island, children with mental retardation were given hepatitis orally and by injection to see if they could be cured. As the Associated Press reports, the late 1940s and 50s saw a huge growth in U.S. pharmaceutical and healthcare industries, accompanied by a boom in prisoner experiments funded by both the government and corporations. By the 1960s, at least half of the states allowed prisoners to be used as medical guinea pigs because they were cheaper than chimpanzees. That's a quote. Moreover, quote, some of these studies, mostly from the 1940s into the 60s, apparently were never covered by news media. Others were reported at the time, but the focus was on the promise of enduring new cures, while glossing over the fact how the test subjects were being treated. Media blackouts, propaganda spin, sound familiar? Now, this is all, and remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is government. This is government. And not to mention things like we created Lyme disease in Plum Island in Long Island, made its way into Connecticut. And now Lyme disease is not only just a northeastern thing, it's spreading all throughout the country. Lyme disease. It was initially going to be a biological weapon that could be used against Russian cattle and livestock. But whoopsie. Now, you can go and check this out. This is at rutherford.org. Everything I just said right there is referenced. That was published on April 21st, 2020. The headline is Human Lab Rats, the U.S. government's secret history of grisly experiments. I'll put it into the chat room right now. I'll put it into the Discord right now, and I will put it into the Telegram right now. So let me just put, so you can go and you can read it on your own. A little bit more, though. Why not? Why not? For example, ladies and gentlemen, I dug this one up. Do you remember, you probably don't because it was so long ago, Prohibition. The history of poisoned alcohol includes an unlikely culprit, the U.S. government. That's right, ladies and gents. There was a time during Prohibition, which was completely unconstitutional, that the U.S. government thought that drinking whiskey warranted execution. They would poison alcohol to make sure that people were feeling a little bit more deterred from having that drink after work. That was a crime that warranted execution at one point in our government's history, and it was only about 100 years ago. I mean, Prohibition started in 1920. So that's how much we've evolved, ladies and gents. But don't worry. Don't worry. Here's a headline from the Hill. There's bipartisan legislators demand answers from Fauci on cruel puppy experiments. Oh boy. Oh boy. A bipartisan group of legislators. Oh, they're upset about these puppy experiments. They're sewing aborted fetus scalps to the asses of rats in laboratories in Pennsylvania, funded by the NIH. But these puppies are concerning. This is very concerning.